VOLODYAS Come Someone Shouted in the Yard, by Anton Pavlovich Chekhov. Aster VOLODYAS Here bawled Natalia the cook, running into the dining room. Oh my goodness. The whole Korolyov family, who had been expecting their Volodya from hour to hour, rushed to the windows at the front door. Stood a wide sledge with 3 white horses, in a cloud of steam. The sledge was empty, for Volodya was already in the hall, untying his hood with red and chilly fingers, his school overcoat, his cap, his snowboots, and the hair on his temples were all white with frost, and his whole figure from head to foot diffused such a pleasant fresh smell of the snow that the very sight of him made one want to shiver and say brrr. His mother and aunt ran to kiss and hug him. Natalia plumped down at his feet and began pulling off his snowboots. His sisters shrieked with delight. The doors creaked and banged, and Volodya's father, in his waistcoat and shirt sleeves, ran out into the hall with scissors in his hand and cried out in alarm. "We were expecting you all yesterday. Did you come all right? Had a good journey? Mercy on us. You might let him say how do you do to his father. I am his father after all." Bow Wow barked the huge black dog, my lord, in a deep bass, tapping with his tail on the walls and furniture. For 2 minutes there was nothing but a general hubbub of joy. After the first outburst of delight was over, the Korolyovs noticed that there was, besides their Volodya, another small person in the hall, wrapped up in scarves and shawls, and white with frost. He was standing perfectly still in a corner in the shadow of a big fox-lined overcoat. "Volodya, darling, who is it?" asked his mother in a whisper. "Oh," cried Volodya, "this let me introduce my friend Lentilov, a schoolfellow in the 2nd class. I have brought him to stay with us." "Delighted to hear it. You are very welcome," the father said cordially. "Excuse me, I've been at work without my coat. Please come in." Natalia helped Mr. Lentilov off with his things. "Mercy on us. Do turn that dog out, he is unendurable." A few minutes later, Volodya and his friend Lentilov, somewhat dazed by their noisy welcome and still red from the outside cold, were sitting down to tea. The winter sun making its way through the snow, and the frozen tracery on the windowpanes gleamed on the samovar and plunged its pure rays in the tea basin. The room was warm, and the boys felt as though the warmth and the frost were struggling together with a tingling sensation in their bodies. "Well, Christmas will soon be here," the father said in a pleasant sing-song voice, rolling a cigarette of dark reddish tobacco. "It doesn't seem long since the summer when Mama was crying at your going, and here you are back again. Time flies, my boy, before you have time to cry out. Old age is upon you." "Mr. Lentilov, take some more, please. Help yourself. We don't stand on ceremony." Volodya's 3 sisters, Katia, Sonia, and Masha, the eldest, was 11, sat at the table and never took their eyes off the newcomer. Lentilov was of the same height and age as Volodya, but not as round-faced and fair-skinned. He was thin, dark, and freckled. His hair stood up like a brush, his eyes were small, and his lips were thick. He was in fact distinctly ugly, and if he had not been wearing the school uniform, he might have been taken for the son of a cook. He seemed morose, did not speak, and never once smiled. The little girls, staring at him, immediately came to the conclusion that he must be a very clever and learned person. He seemed to be thinking about something all the time, and was so absorbed in his own thoughts that whenever he was spoken to, he started, threw his head back, and asked to have the question repeated. The little girls noticed that Volodya, who had always been so merry and talkative, also said very little, did not smile at all, and hardly seemed to be glad to be home. All the time they were at tea, he only once addressed his sisters, and then he said something so strange. He pointed to the samovar and said, "In California, they don't drink tea but gin." He too seemed absorbed in his own thoughts, and to judge by the looks that passed between him and his friend Lentilov, their thoughts were the same. After tea, they all went into the nursery. The girls and their father took up the work that had been interrupted by the arrival of the boys. They were making flowers and frills for the Christmas tree out of paper of different colors. It was an attractive and noisy occupation. Every fresh flower was greeted by the little girls with shrieks of delight, even of awe, as though the flower had dropped straight from heaven. Their father was in ecstasies too, and every now and then he threw the scissors on the floor in vexation at their bluntness. Their mother kept running into the nursery with an anxious face, asking, "Who has taken my scissors? Ivan Nikolaich, have you taken my scissors again?" "Mercy on us, I am not even allowed a pair of scissors," their father would respond in a lachrymose voice, and flinging himself back in his chair, he would pretend to be a deeply injured man, but a minute later he would be in ecstasies again. On his former holidays, Volodya too had taken part in the preparations for the Christmas tree, or had been running in the yard to look at the snow mountain that the watchman and the shepherd were building. But this time, Volodya and Lentilov took no notice whatever of the colored paper, and did not once go into the stable. They sat in the window, and began whispering to one another. Then they opened an atlas, and looked carefully at him. First to Perm, Lentilov said in an undertone from there to Tyumen, then Tomsk, then Kamchatka, there the Samoyeds take one over Bering Straits in boats, and then we are in America, there are lots of furry animals there. And California, asked Volodya. California is lower down, we've only to get to America, and California is not far off, and one can get a living by hunting and plunder. All day long Lentilov avoided the little girls, and seemed to look at them with suspicion. In the evening, he happened to be left alone with them for 5 minutes, or so. It was awkward to be silent. He cleared his throat, morosely rubbed his left hand against his right, looked sullenly at Katya, and asked, "Have you read Main Read?" "No, I haven't." "I say, can you skate?" Absorbed in his own reflections, Lentilov made no reply to this question. He simply puffed out his cheeks, and gave a long sigh, as though he were very hot. He looked up at Katya once more and said, "When a herd of bisons stampedes across the prairie, the earth trembles, and the frightened mustangs kick and neigh." He smiled impressively and added, "And the Indians attack the trains too, but worst of all are the mosquitoes and the termites." "Why, what's that?" "They're something like ants, but with wings. They bite fearfully. Do you know who I am?" "Mr. Lentilov." "No, I am Montihomo, the Hawk's Claw chief of the ever-victorious." Masha the youngest looked at him, then into the darkness out of window, and said wondering, "And we had lentils for supper yesterday." Lentilov's incomprehensible utterances, and the way he was always whispering with Volodya, and the way Volodya seemed now to be always thinking about something instead of playing, all this was strange and mysterious, and the two elder girls, Katya and Sonya, began to keep a sharp lookout on the boys at night. When the boys had gone to bed, the girls crept to their bedroom door and listened to what they were saying. What they discovered: the boys were planning to run away to America to dig for gold. They had everything ready for the journey: a pistol, 2 knives, biscuits, a burning glass to serve instead of matches, a compass, and 4 rubles in cash. They learned that the boys would have to walk some thousands of miles, and would have to fight tigers and savages on the road. Then they would get gold and ivory, slay their enemies, become pirates, drink gin, and finally marry beautiful maidens, and make a plantation. The boys interrupted each other in their excitement. Throughout the conversation, Lentilov called himself Montihomo, the Hawk's Claw, and Volodya was my pale-face brother. "Mind you don't tell Mama," said Katya, as they went back to bed. "Volodya will bring us gold and ivory from America, but if you tell Mama, he won't be allowed to go." The day before Christmas Eve, Lentilov spent the whole day poring over the map of Asia and making notes, while Volodya, with a languid and swollen face that looked as though it had been stung by a bee, walked about the rooms and ate nothing. And once he stood still before the holy image in the nursery, crossed himself, and said, "Lord, forgive me, a sinner. Lord, have pity on my poor, unhappy Mama." In the evening he burst out crying. On saying good night, he gave his father a long hug, and then hugged his mother and sisters. Katya and Sonya knew what was the matter, but little Masha was puzzled, completely puzzled. Every time she looked at Lentilov, she grew thoughtful and said with a sigh, "When Lent comes, nurse says we shall have to eat peas and lentils." Early in the morning of Christmas Eve, Katya and Sonya slipped quietly out of bed and went to find out how the boys meant to run away to America. They crept to their door. "Then you don't mean to go?" Lentilov was saying angrily. "Speak out, aren't you going?" "Oh dear," Volodya wept softly, "how can I go? I feel so unhappy about Mama." "My pale-face brother, I pray you let us set off. You declared you were going, you egged me on, and now the time comes you funk it." I am not funking it, but I am sorry for Mama." "Say once and for all, are you going, or are you not?" "I am going, only wait a little, I want to be at home a little." "In that case, I will go by myself," Lentilov declared. "I can get on without you, and you wanted to hunt tigers and fight. Since that's how it is, give me back my cartridges." At this Volodya cried so bitterly that his sisters could not help crying too. Silence followed. "So you are not coming?" Lentilov began again. I am coming." "Well, put on your things then." And Lentilov tried to cheer Volodya up by singing the praises of America, growling like a tiger, pretending to be a steamer, scolding him, and promising to give him all the ivory and lions and tigers' skins. And this thin dark boy with his freckles and his bristling shock of hair impressed the little girls as an extraordinary, remarkable person. He was a hero, a determined character, who knew no fear, and he growled so ferociously that standing at the door, they really might imagine there was a tiger or lion inside when the little girls went back to their room, and dressed Katia's eyes were full of tears, and she said, "Oh, I feel so frightened." Everything was as usual, till 2 o'clock when they sat down to dinner. Then it appeared that the boys were not in the house. They sent to the servants' quarters, to the stables, to the bailiff's cottage. They were not to be found. They sent into the village. They were not there. At tea too, the boys were still absent, and by suppertime Volodya's mother was dreadfully uneasy, and even shed tears. Late in the evening, they sent again to the village. They searched everywhere and walked along the river bank, with lanterns. Heavens, what a fuss there was! Next day the police officer came, and a paper of some sort was written out in the dining room. Their mother cried. All of a sudden a sledge stopped at the door with 3 white horses, in a cloud of steam. "Volodya's come," someone shouted in the yard. "Master Volodya's here," bawled Natalia, running into the dining room, and Milord barked his deep bass bow-wow. It seemed that the boys had been stopped in the arcade, where they had gone from shop to shop asking where they could get gunpowder. Volodya burst into sobs as soon as he came into the hall, and flung himself on his mother's neck. The little girls, trembling, wondered with terror what would happen next. They saw their father take Volodya and Lentilov into his study, and there he talked to them a long while. "Is this a proper thing to do?" their father said to them. "I only pray they won't hear of it at school. You would both be expelled. You ought to be ashamed, Mr. Lentilov, really. It's not at all the thing to do. You began it. And I hope you will be punished by your parents. How could you? Where did you spend the night?" "At the station," Lentilov answered proudly. Then Volodya went to bed, and had a compress steeped in vinegar on his forehead. A telegram was sent off, and next day, a lady, Lentilov's mother, made her appearance and bore off her son. Lentilov looked morose and haughty to the end, and he did not utter a single word at taking leave of the little girls. But he took Katia's book, and wrote in it, as a souvenir, Monte Homo, the hawk's claw chief of the ever victorious.